Camille Ford is pressed flat against the wall of a walk-in refrigerator, both hands cupped over her own mouth, listening to footsteps stop just outside the door. Her heart is slamming so hard she can feel it in her teeth. Somewhere past that door, string lights glow over 300 guests, and her sister is being introduced as Mrs. Whitney Marsh Calloway for the very first time. Camille should be out there. She paid for the roses. She paid for half the open bar. Instead, she is hiding in a freezer built for wedding cake, breath fogging in front of her face, praying that whoever is standing on the other side keeps walking. The footsteps do not move. A woman's voice, muffled through steel, says, "She's not at her table. Check the kitchen." Camille knows that voice. It belongs to her stepmother, Renata, and there is a smile buried inside it even now. The same smile Renata used the night she told a 9-year-old Camille that big girls don't cry over things that don't matter. The door handle rattles. Camille grabs a rolling rack of covered trays and pulls it in front of the door. Quiet, fast, her palms slick with cold sweat. The handle rattles again, then stops. Footsteps retreat, unhurried, toward the ballroom. Only then does Camille let herself breathe. 10 minutes ago, a hotel security guard escorted her out of the reception hall in front of 200 witnesses because her own sister told the wedding planner that Camille didn't have a seat. Not a bad seat, no seat. And when Camille asked where she was supposed to go, Whitney had smiled the exact same smile their stepmother uses, leaned close enough that only Camille could hear her, and said 4 words that are still sitting in Camille's chest like a stone. The kitchen has room. That's the part nobody outside this family would believe. That the woman who wired $81,000 into the wedding account 3 weeks ago is currently crouched behind a rolling rack of dessert trays so she doesn't get thrown out of a building she basically paid for. If you're just joining this story, here's what you need to know before anything else happens tonight somewhere in that ballroom. A man is about to walk through the front doors who has never once, in 11 years, attended a wedding on American soil. And he is not coming for the bride. Before we proceed, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is, because I want to know exactly who's sitting with Camille tonight while all of this unfolds. Camille sits down on an overturned crate between 2 stacks of chafing dishes and finally lets her shoulders drop. The kitchen smells like garlic butter and hot metal. Somewhere beyond the double doors, the DJ is starting the father-daughter dance, and Camille can hear her own father's voice, warm and easy, the voice he never once used with her after she turned 26 and stopped agreeing with everything he said. She isn't angry. Not anymore. Anger takes energy, and she used the last of hers up 2 years ago, the year her father married Renata and Renata's daughter Whitney became. Without any conversation, without any vote, the golden child of a family Camille had spent her whole life building. It started small, an empty chair at Thanksgiving that nobody explained, a birthday card that arrived a week late with no gift inside. Then it became her name quietly dropped from the family business newsletter. Then it became her father introducing Whitney as "my daughter" at a golf fundraiser, while Camille stood 2 feet away, unintroduced, holding a drink she didn't want. Camille kept paying anyway, kept showing up anyway. Some small, stubborn part of her kept believing that if she just gave enough, did enough, forgave enough, the door would open back up and she'd be let back in. Tonight, that door became a freezer she had to hide in. She remembers the exact moment things started to shift. 3 Christmases ago, standing in her father's kitchen with a casserole dish still warm in her hands. Renata had looked at the dish, looked at Camille, and said, "Oh, we're not really doing gifts from you this year, honey. We didn't want it to feel unbalanced with Whitney." Camille had laughed, because it sounded like a joke. Nobody else laughed. That was the first time she understood that something in this family had already been decided without her in the room. After that, the small cuts came fast. A group photo where someone cropped her out before printing it for the mantle. A family group chat that quietly stopped including her, and when she asked about it, her father said it was just easier to keep things simple with the wedding coming up. Camille kept telling herself it wasn't personal. It is very hard to keep telling yourself that when you're crouched behind a rolling rack of wedding cake, listening for footsteps. A young server pushes through the double doors, sees Camille sitting on the crate, and freezes with a tray balanced on one arm. "You're not supposed to be back here," the server says, then immediately softens, glancing over her shoulder toward the ballroom. "Sorry, I just mean they told us if we saw you to say something." "To who?" Camille asks. The server's eyes flick down. She doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. Camille stands, smooths down the front of the navy dress she bought 4 years ago for an interview she never got, and decides she is done sitting on crates. She'll leave through the side entrance, get in her car, and let this family finish their party without her, the same way they've been finishing everything without her for 2 years. That's when the first black SUV rolls past the kitchen window. Then a second, then a third. Camille counts 11 before she stops counting, watching through the small square of glass in the kitchen door as headlights sweep across the gravel drive in a slow, deliberate line, the kind of arrival that doesn't happen by accident. Radios crackle somewhere near the valet stand. A groundskeeper drops a folding chair and doesn't bother picking it up. Out in the ballroom, the music stops mid-song. For a moment, nothing happens. No one moves. Even the servers stop carrying trays, standing frozen in the swinging doorway like the whole building is holding its breath at once. Somewhere near the valet stand, a two-way radio clicks on and off, on and off. Someone's trying to get an answer nobody seems willing to give. Camille has been to enough of her father's business events to know what an unscheduled motorcade means. And this isn't one car pulling up late. This is a small army arriving somewhere it wasn't invited. And every single person in that ballroom just went quiet at the same time, which means every single person in that ballroom recognized something Camille doesn't. She pushes the kitchen door open an inch, just enough to see through. Guests are standing. Not the polite half-rise people do for a bride and groom. Full standing, chairs scraping back. A senator Camille recognizes from the news setting down his glass so fast champagne sloshes over his hand. A man near the head table says a name under his breath, and 3 other men repeat it, and none of them say it happily. Camille doesn't catch the name. She only catches the reaction to it, which is somehow worse. Grown men who negotiate multi-million-dollar deals for a living are standing there looking like teenagers who just got caught somewhere they shouldn't be, and none of them are looking at each other. They're all looking at the door. Her stepmother appears at the ballroom entrance first, smoothing her dress, arranging her face into the practiced warmth she uses for donors and photographers. Camille's father is right behind her, already extending a hand toward the door before he even knows who's walking through it. The same instinct he's had at every gala for 30 years. Smile first, ask questions later. Then the doors open all the way, and the room goes fully silent. The kind of silence that has weight to it, and a man Camille has never seen before in her life steps inside like he already owns the building. He's not loud. He's not smiling. He wears a plain dark suit with no tie, no watch anyone can see, nothing that announces money the way everyone else in that room announces it. He barely looks at the chandeliers or the flowers or the 300 people staring at him. 2 men flank him a step behind, close enough to matter, far enough to stay invisible, the kind of quiet, practiced distance that only comes from doing this job for a very long time. His eyes move once across the room, slow and unbothered, the way someone reads a page they've already memorized, and then he stops scanning entirely. Camille's father reaches him first, hand out, already talking, already pitching something about a project in Seattle, the words tumbling out too fast, the way people talk when they're nervous, and trying not to show it. Renata hovers just behind him, hands clasped, chin lifted, the exact posture she uses for photographers. Whitney's new husband looks lost entirely, glancing between his bride and the stranger like he's trying to figure out which reaction he's supposed to have. The man in the doorway doesn't take the hand. He asks a question instead, quiet enough that Camille has to lean into the door gap to catch it, but clear enough that every phone in that ballroom is suddenly recording. "Where's Camille Ford?" Nobody answers. Camille's stepmother laughs, a small nervous sound. Her father's hand is still hanging in the air untouched. Whitney, still in her wedding gown, goes very still near the cake table. And for the first time all night, the golden smile disappears completely from her face. Camille presses her hand flat against the kitchen door, heart pounding again, louder this time, because whatever is happening on the other side of that glass, it has her name in it, and she has absolutely no idea why a stranger, surrounded by armed security, just walked into her sister's wedding, asking for a woman her own family hid in the kitchen an hour ago. She thinks about walking out there herself. She thinks about staying exactly where she is until whoever this is gets tired of waiting and leaves. Neither option feels safe. Both options feel like they're about to happen, whether she chooses them or not, because out in that ballroom, her stepmother has just turned toward the kitchen doors, and every single guest in that room is turning to look in the same direction. If you've made it this far, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens the second those doors swing open, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight. I'll be reading every single one because I want to know exactly how far along this story we're going together. The kitchen door creaks. Someone on the other side has just put their hand on the handle. The kitchen door swings open, and Do-Yun Baek is standing there, alone, no security behind him this time. Just him and the swinging door settling against his palm. Camille doesn't move. She can't. Her back is against a stainless steel counter, one hand still gripping a folded dish towel like it might actually protect her from something, and the man in front of her is studying her with an expression she can't read at all. Not threat, not pity, something closer to relief. "You're Camille," he says. Not a question. "Who's asking?" Her voice comes out steadier than she feels. He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he glances around the kitchen, the cooling racks, the abandoned tray of untouched cake slices, the crate she'd been sitting on 10 minutes earlier, and something tightens in his jaw. Quick, controlled. Gone before it fully forms. "I've been looking for you for 5 years, he says. Camille laughs, short and disbelieving. "I've never met you in my life." "No," he agrees. "But I've read your name in a report more times than I can count." Behind him, through the swinging door, Camille can hear the ballroom, not music anymore, just the low murmur of 200 people who have stopped pretending they aren't listening. Someone's heels click closer, then stop, like they got as far as the threshold and lost their nerve. Before we go any further, if you're just catching this part, drop where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are, because I want to know who's in the room with Camille right now while this stranger explains himself. Do-Yun steps further into the kitchen, and for the first time Camille notices he's not looking at her like a stranger looks at someone. He's looking at her like a man confirming something he already believed was true. 4 years ago, he says, a set of documents reached a regulator's office in Seoul. Anonymous. No return address, no name, nothing traceable. Those documents stopped a fraud that would have wiped out retirement funds for 6,000 factory workers connected to my company's supply chain. He pauses. It took my investigators years to trace where that package originated. It came from a law office in Bellevue, Washington, filed under a client name that had been sealed. Camille's stomach drops. "Your name," he says. "That's not possible," Camille says. But even as the words leave her mouth, her mind is already back in that office 4 years ago. The night she photocopied files she wasn't supposed to touch. The night she mailed an envelope to an address she found through a contact at her old firm and told no one, not even her own attorney, exactly where it came from. "It's very possible," Do-Yun says quietly, "because you did it." Somewhere behind him, Renata's voice cuts through the kitchen doorway. Too bright, too fast. "Mr. Beck, I'm sure there's been some confusion. Camille hasn't worked in finance in years. She's really not—" "I didn't ask you," Do-Yun says, without turning around. The room goes silent again. Camille watches her stepmother's face do something Camille has never seen it do before, falter, just slightly, just enough to crack the practice warmth underneath. For 2 years, Camille has been the one standing in doorways getting talked over. She has no idea what to do with the sudden, dizzying feeling of someone finally not letting that happen. Why does this matter to you? Camille asks. Why does a fraud case from 4 years ago bring you to a wedding in Medina, Washington, with a security detail that looks like it belongs to a head of state? Duyun's expression shifts, just barely, because 6 months ago, someone tried the same fraud again. Same shell companies, same construction contracts, different name on the paperwork. He lets that sit for a second. This time, the money trail led back to a hospitality company here in the Pacific Northwest, a company your family owns. The floor seems to tilt under Camille's feet. My father, she says slowly, runs a hospitality group, resorts, nothing else. That's what everyone believes, Doyun says. It's also what the last person who found out believed, right before they stopped finding out anything at all. Camille stares at him. What does that mean? He doesn't answer immediately, and in the silence, Camille hears footsteps approaching fast from the ballroom. Her father's footsteps. She'd know them anywhere. The specific weight of a man who has spent 30 years walking into rooms like he owns them. Walter Ford appears in the doorway, out of breath, tie slightly loosened, and for one full second he looks at his daughter standing beside a foreign billionaire in the middle of a kitchen, and something passes over his face that isn't confusion. It's fear. Camille, he says too carefully. Sweetheart, whatever this is, let's step outside and talk about it as a family. Funny, Camille says, and her voice doesn't shake this time. 20 minutes ago, I wasn't family enough to get a seat at this wedding. Now I'm sweetheart. Du Yun watches this exchange without a word, and Camille gets the sense he's not just listening to what's being said. He's cataloging it, filing it away, the same way he probably files away every board meeting and every contract negotiation, patient and exact. Mr. Ford, Do-Yun says finally, turning to face him directly. I'd like you to explain something to your daughter. In front of me. Right now. Walter's eyes flick toward Renata, toward the ballroom, toward anywhere except the man standing in his kitchen. I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Meridian Point construction, Du-Yun says. I know about the 3 shell accounts routed through a bank in the Cayman Islands. I know the name on the original filing 4 years ago, before it was quietly changed. And I know that name belonged to your daughter, right up until someone made sure it didn't. Camille turns to her father. What is he talking about? Walter says nothing. That silence answers louder than anything he could have said. And for the first time all night, Camille sees something new happen in her father's eyes. Not anger, not the practiced charm he's used on her for 2 years. Guilt. Dad, Camille says, and her voice cracks slightly on the word. The first time it's cracked all night. What did you do? The kitchen door bangs open behind them, and Whitney is standing there in her wedding gown, mascara streaked down one cheek, staring at her father like she's never seen him before either. Somebody needs to explain this, Whitney says, because I am not marrying into a family with federal agents at the front gate. Camille freezes. Federal agents? Du-Yun's eyes stay locked on Walter. They arrived 4 minutes ago, he says calmly. I called them before I walked through your front door. The ballroom goes fully silent the moment Du-Yun leads Camille out of the kitchen, his hand never touching her but his presence somehow directing the entire room's attention like a current. 200 guests are still seated, phones half raised, plates of untouched wedding cake going soft under the chandelier light, and every single one of them watches Camille walk out of a kitchen she was banished to an hour earlier, standing beside a man half the room apparently already fears. Sit down, Renata hisses at her, quiet enough that only Camille can hear it. You are embarrassing this family in front of everyone we know. Camille doesn't sit down. For 2 years, she has made herself small in rooms exactly like this one. Tonight, standing under the same chandeliers that watched her get walked out by security an hour ago, something in her simply refuses to shrink again. No, she says, loud enough that 3 tables turn to look. I don't think I will. Du-Yun doesn't sit either. He stands at the edge of the dance floor, hands folded, And when he speaks, his voice carries without him raising it at all, the kind of quiet that makes an entire room lean forward to listen. 5 years ago, he says, someone in this family risked everything to stop a fraud that would have destroyed thousands of lives on the other side of the world. That person was pushed out, cut off, and erased from every family photograph on that mantle behind the head table. He pauses. Tonight, that same family sat her in a kitchen so she wouldn't embarrass them in front of their guests. Nobody in the room moves. I came here tonight to thank her, Du-Yun continues. I did not expect to also find the second fraud she was trying to warn everyone about 4 years too late. Grant, the groom, stands up from the head table, still in his tux, looking between his new wife and his new father-in-law like the floor underneath. The whole reception has just opened up. Someone tell me what's happening right now, he says, because I did not sign up for this. Whitney doesn't answer him. She's staring at her father, and for the first time tonight, Camille watches her sister's face crumble out of the practiced wedding day smile completely. Dad, Whitney says, tell me he's lying. Walter says nothing. The silence stretches long enough that a server near the kitchen doors quietly sets down a tray, like even she understands this isn't a moment anyone wants interrupted by clattering dishes. Du-Yun turns toward Walter directly. 4 years ago, your daughter mailed evidence of fraud to Korean regulators because she refused to sign off on falsified documents. You let this family believe she'd had a breakdown. You let them believe she'd stolen from you. You built 2 years of exile around a lie to protect a fraud that has now grown large enough to attract federal attention. That's not Walter starts, then stops, because there's nothing true left to finish that sentence with. Camille feels something shift in her chest, something she hasn't let herself feel in 2 years. Not quite relief, not quite vindication, something rawer than either. I sent that report because it was the right thing to do, she says, and her voice carries across the ballroom now too. Not because I wanted this. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted my family to believe me. Renata steps forward, chin lifted, still trying to salvage something. This is a private family matter, and I don't think it's appropriate to. It stopped being private, Du-Yun says, the moment it involves 6,000 pension accounts and 3 federal agencies. At the far end of the ballroom, the main doors open, and 4 agents in plain dark jackets step through, unhurried, badges already visible, scanning the room the way people scan a room, when they already know exactly who they're looking for. Camille's mother-in-law, no, not her mother-in-law, her stepmother, Camille corrects herself, because none of these titles have meant what they were supposed to mean for years now, takes one step backward toward the exit. One of the agents looks directly at Walter Ford. Sir, we need a few minutes of your time. The band, still frozen at the edge of the dance, happened to doesn't dare start playing again. Camille watches her father stand up slowly, adjusting his jacket with hands that aren't quite steady, and for one strange moment, she almost feels sorry for him. Almost. Du-Yun leans slightly toward her, his voice low enough that only she can hear it. There's something else, he says. Something bigger than tonight. I didn't come here only for the fraud. Camille turns to look at him fully. What do you mean? He hesitates, just for a second, the first hesitation she's seen from him all night. The first person who tried to expose this family, years before you did, he says. She didn't walk away quietly. She disappeared. Officially, it was ruled an accident. Camille's chest goes tight. Unofficially? Du-Yun's eyes don't leave hers. Unofficially, my investigators don't believe that for a second. And what we found last week connects directly to your family, to this house, to a name I don't think you've heard in a very long time. Somewhere behind them, Whitney is crying into Grant's shoulder. Agents are speaking low and urgent to Walter near the terrace doors, and Renata has gone completely silent for the first time all evening. But Camille barely registers any of it because Du-Yun has just reached into his jacket and pulled out a single folded photograph, and he is holding it out to her like it might be the heaviest thing he's ever carried. Before I show you this, he says quietly, I need you to understand what happened tonight was never the real story. The photograph trembles slightly in Camille's hand before she even unfolds it, because Do-Yoon's face has gone somewhere darker than she's seen all night. She opens it. A young woman stares back at her, maybe mid-20s, standing in front of a house Camille doesn't recognize, laughing at something outside the frame. There's a date scrawled on the back in faded pen. 22 years ago. Who is this? Camille asks. Her name was Diane Sutter, Do-Yoon says. She worked in your family's accounting office before you were even born. She found the first version of this fraud decades before you did. Camille's pulse picks up. What happened to her? Officially, a car accident on Highway 520. Late at night, no witnesses. Do-Yoon pauses. Unofficially, my investigators found a wire transfer sent from your father's company 3 days after her death to a private security contractor with no other listed clients. Comment below right now if you saw this twist coming, because Camille certainly didn't, and neither did anyone else in that ballroom. Camille's knees feel unsteady. You're telling me my father had someone killed. I'm telling you evidence exists that raises that question, Do-Yoon says carefully. And tonight, for the first time in 22 years, someone finally has enough proof to ask it out loud. Across the ballroom, agents are walking Walter Ford toward the terrace doors, and for the first time all night, Camille sees real fear on her father's face, not the practiced concern he performs at business dinners, but something raw and unguarded. Wait, Camille says, stepping forward before she can stop herself. I want to hear him say it. The lead agent glances at Do-Yoon, who gives a small nod, and Walter is brought back into the center of the ballroom, guests still frozen in their seats, phones still recording every second. Dad, Camille says, Diane Sutter, tell me the truth. Walter's jaw works silently for a moment. Then something in him seems to give way, the same way a dam gives way, not all at once, but in one long crack that can't be stopped once it starts. She was going to go to the board, he says quietly. She was going to destroy everything I built. I didn't order anything, I just made a call. I told someone to make her disappear from the investigation. I never asked how. Renata gasped somewhere behind him. Whitney has gone completely silent, one hand pressed over her mouth. You let me think I was crazy, Camille says, her voice shaking now. Not from fear, but from something closer to 22 years of buried grief, finally finding a name. You let this whole family think I betrayed you, when the truth is you've been hiding this for longer than I've been alive. Walter doesn't answer. He doesn't have anything left to say that would matter. The agents lead him out through the terrace doors, past guests who came dressed for celebration and are leaving with their phones full of footage that will be online before midnight. Renata follows a few steps behind, no longer graceful, no longer composed, just a woman chasing after the wreckage of a life she spent 30 years building on someone else's silence. Whitney stands alone in her wedding gown in the middle of the dance floor, mascara streaked, looking at Camille like she's seeing her sister clearly for the first time in years. I didn't know, Whitney says quietly, about any of it. I swear I didn't know. Camille studies her sister's face and, for the first time tonight, feels something other than anger. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just recognition that Whitney has been living inside the same lie Camille was pushed out of, just from a more comfortable seat. I believe you, Camille says. That doesn't fix tonight, but I believe you. Do-Yoon steps quietly to Camille's side as the ballroom begins to empty, guests filing out in stunned clusters, whispering into phones, already turning tonight into a story they'll tell for years. There's one more thing, Do-Yoon says. Camille turns to him, exhausted, raw, barely able to absorb one more revelation. What now? Diane Sutter had a daughter, he says, 6 years old when her mother died, raised by relatives who never knew the full story. My investigators found her 3 weeks ago. He hesitates. She's been looking for answers her entire adult life. She doesn't know yet what we found tonight. Camille stares at him. Where is she now? Do-Yoon's expression softens, just slightly, the first fully open thing she's seen on his face all night. Closer than you think, he says. I have her flying in tomorrow. I think it's time the two of you finally met. Outside, through the terrace doors, red and blue lights flash silently across the lake. And somewhere beyond the emptying ballroom, Camille Ford realizes the story that started with an empty seat and a walk-in freezer is nowhere near finished. Camille is standing on the terrace at sunrise when a woman she's never met walks toward her across the wet grass, and something about the way she moves feels instantly, impossibly familiar. You're Camille, the woman says. It isn't a question. Her voice cracks slightly on the name. And you're Diane's daughter, Camille says. The woman nods, eyes already filling. My name is Renee Sutter. I've spent my whole life not knowing why my mother died. Mr. Beck called me at midnight and told me more in 10 minutes than I've learned in 22 years. Camille doesn't know this woman, has never met her, and yet standing here on a terrace overlooking a lake gone silver with morning light, she feels a strange, quiet kinship, the kind that only exists between two people who were both erased by the same lie. I'm sorry, Camille says, for what it cost you. I'm sorry too, Renee says, for what it cost you. Neither of them says anything for a moment. Somewhere behind them, the last of the wedding tents are being dismantled. Workers folding white cloth over chairs that held 200 guests who left in stunned silence 12 hours earlier. Du-Yun approaches from the house, 2 cups of coffee in hand, offering one to each woman. The federal case is moving fast, he says. Your father is cooperating. It won't undo what happened, but it will mean something for the people whose pensions were nearly stolen. And for Diane. Camille takes the coffee, wraps both hands around the warmth of it, and looks out at the lake for a long moment before she speaks. I spent 2 years thinking I did something wrong, she says. Turns out I was the only one in that family who did anything right. You were, Du-Yun says simply. Whitney appears in the doorway behind them. Still in yesterday's makeup, wedding gown traded for jeans and one of Grant's old sweatshirts. She hesitates before stepping outside, like she's not sure she's still welcome. I don't expect you to forgive me, Whitney says to Camille. I just wanted to say I'm going to do better, starting today. Camille studies her sister for a long moment, then nods, just once. That's a start. It isn't everything. It isn't a full reconciliation, wrapped up neat with a bow, but it's honest. And after 2 years of everything in this family being anything but honest, honest feels like enough for one sunrise. Renee looks between the two sisters, then out at the lake, and says quietly, my mother used to tell me that the truth doesn't disappear just because people stop saying it out loud. It just waits. Camille thinks about that for a long moment. 22 years of waiting, 2 years of her own, and somehow, on one impossible night in Medina, Washington, all of it finally found its way to the surface at once. Du-Yun turns to Camille as the sun climbs higher over the water. What will you do now? Camille almost laughs at the question, because for the first time in longer than she can remember, she genuinely doesn't know, and the not knowing doesn't scare her the way it used to. I don't know yet, she says. For the first time in years, that actually feels okay. That's usually where the better parts of a life begin, Du-Yun says. The four of them stand there a while longer, coffee cooling in their hands, the lake turning gold, the wedding tents coming down piece by piece behind them, and for the first time since she hid in that walk-in freezer, Camille Ford feels something that isn't fear and isn't grief. It feels like the beginning of something she gets to choose for herself. Thank you for staying with Camille's story all the way to this morning by the lake. If her story moved you even a little, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because there's another story coming soon, one just as full of heart and just as determined to remind you that the truth always finds its way home. And if this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Share your thoughts in the comments, because your stories inspire this channel just as much as the ones I get to tell you. Until next time, take care of each other.